Today we want to continue the talk on consciousness. This is the third time we are talking on consciousness. I think I want to finish it today because we have so many other things to discuss. This first quotation is from Anapanasati Sutta, and Buddha said, experience in the mind, breathe in and out. Now, we breathe when we sleep, even when we are unconscious, we breathe. But here, Buddha specifically mentioned to be conscious of breathing in and breathing out. In this training, let me read this first. I shall breathe in experience in the mind, trains thus. I shall breathe out experience in the mind, trains thus. I shall breathe in gladdening the mind, trains thus. I shall breathe out gladdening the mind, trains thus. I shall breathe in concentrating the mind, trains thus. I shall breathe out concentrating the mind, trains thus. I shall breathe in liberating the mind, trains thus. I shall breathe out liberating the mind. Now, this part is relatively clear. However, experience in the mind, we breathe in, I shall breathe in experience in the mind. That means at that stage there is no any particular mental conditions except the awareness of our breath. And I shall breathe out experience in the mind. That means we simply become aware of our consciousness. Here mind means consciousness. You remember me mentioning earlier, in earlier class, that the Chitta, Mano, Vijnana. In the Anapanasati Sutta, the word used is that section, Chitta, the word Chitta. In the word Samahitam Chittam, for instance, Samahitam Chittam Pajanati. Or, what is the word? Chitta Patisangvedi. Chitta Patisangvedi Asasisami iti Sikkati. Chitta Patisangvedi Pasasisami iti Sikkati. There the word Chitta is used, not Mano or Vijnana. As we discussed earlier, these three words are synonymously used. Right. That is why Buddha selected in this particular discourse the word Chitta. There is no any other reason since they all are similar words. Chitta Parisamvedi Asi Sami Sikati, Chitta Parisamvedi Pasi Sami Sikati. Then, Abhipamodyan Chittang Asasi Sami Sikati. Abhipamodya, gladdening. Breathing in, breathing out, in all these cases. Then, similarly, Samahitam Chittam Vajanati. Asamahitam Chittam Vajanati. Or Pasambhayankaya Sankaram Asya Sami Sikati. Pasambhayankaya Sankaram Pasya Sami Sikati. Then, Vimuttam Chittam Vajanati. Avimuttam Chittam, liberated mind. I breathe in, and I shall breathe out, liberating the mind. Now, liberating from all other mental activities. Now, he said, on that occasion, a bhikkhu abides contemplating the mind as mind, ardent, fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief of the world. On that occasion, our covetousness is abhijja, domanassa. Domanassa means grief. I do not say, this is the important thing to stress, I do not say that there is the development of mindfulness of breathing for one who is forgetful. Who is forgetful. Who is not fully aware. That is why on that occasion a bhikkhu abides contemplating the mind as mind, abiding fully aware and mindful, having put away covetousness and grief. Why did he say this? That I do not say that there is the development of mind, the mindfulness of breathing for one who is forgetful. That means there are three moments: pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. You can see the pleasant arising of pleasant moment if you really mindful, and you see unpleasant and passing away of the pleasant moment. You can see the moment of arising of unpleasant moment and arising of passing unpleasant moment. But you do not know arising of neutral or equanimous moment and passing away of equanimous moment. If you are not mindful, you cannot make this distinction. That is why Buddha said, if you are I do not say there is the development of mindfulness of breathing for one who is forgetful. If one is forgetful, he would not know this arising of and passing away of neutral state. Other two states you can see arising and passing. But the neutral or equanimous state you cannot see. Only when you are really fully mindful, you will find that very fine point. You see, the mindfulness has to be that sharp and clear. Mindfulness, sometimes I wonder how Buddha put this experience into words. How did he put this experience into words? Because this experience takes place so quickly, at any given moment, if you are really mindful, countless things are happening in our mind. Countless things. Not one single thing. Countless things are arising, countless things are passing away. Some of them will be feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. They are rising and falling, and we feel the inner vibration. Sometimes entire body is vibrating, and awareness is completely has taken over everything. And to select one, to select one word to point out one of them, you have to have a very, very sharp mind. That is how the Buddha had. Buddha is so powerful, his mind is so powerful, that because nobody taught him all these things. Nobody taught him. He figured out a word to put into that particular experience. And that is why when you are really mindful, only you cannot at the same time you cannot communicate with somebody. You cannot think of how can I say this to somebody at that time. Because even that thought will disrupt your mindfulness, awareness. But at the end of the session or sitting meditation and so on, your awareness has become so clear that then you can use words to explain what you have experienced. And Buddha had this.
Bhante, for me, when you say it's an equanimous or, like a neutral state of mind, that you wouldn't feel anything. That's what.
That is why.
That's what you say.
That is what the Buddha said. That is why the Buddha said that unmindful person cannot practice this equanimous, this mindfulness. Right. The one who is not well developed the mind, this practice becomes difficult. Right. And with the difficulty, the person must practice in order to make it easy. If the person thinks it is difficult and give up, he will never practice. Knowing that it is difficult, the person keeps practicing to make it easy. Your awareness is good. That awareness itself will be your spiritual urgency, the encouragement for you to practice. Then there are two words that we learn in text, Cheto Vimutti, Panya Vimutti. When talking about liberation from suffering, mind liberation and wisdom liberation are mentioned. They are called Cheto Vimutti, Panya Vimutti. Now, mind liberation means when you gain jhana, concentration, and using that concentration, you attain liberation. And that attainment of liberation is called Cheto Vimutta. Panya Vimutta is the one who uses wisdom as a vehicle to attain liberation. But eventually, once you attain the liberation, your mind has both Cheto Vimutta, Panya Vimutta. That means these two words are used depending on the theme you used. If you are a faith-oriented person, or person who likes concentration better, and using concentration, you come to a certain level where you see all this anicca dukkha anatta very clearly. At that moment, your mind liberates through wisdom. Your mind liberates from hindrances through concentration. Liberating mind through hindrances from hindrances through concentration is not, in itself not enough. You also have to see anicca dukkha anatta to liberate yourself. Seeing anicca dukkha anatta is the function of wisdom. So, on the one hand, you gain concentration through removing your hindrances, and then when the mind is removed from hindrances, then it is very, very sharp. At that moment, you begin to see anicca dukkha anatta very clearly. That time you gain wisdom. So you are liberated from both. That is why any arahant is liberated from both, from Cheto Vimutta, and can be called, any arahant can be called Cheto Vimutta and Panya Vimutta. Now in each case, they liberate themselves from all defilements. We have a term for that. Later on we will come to that level, that term. Then I discuss it in a little more detail. For now, we remember this much, that anyone who totally liberated from suffering is liberated from hindrances as well as the notions of permanency and self and so on. Now, there are other terms used for chitta. We are talking about the chitta, the mind. One term we use is rebirth or renewed consciousness. It is called patisandhi chitta. Patisandhi chitta in reality is not found in any Pali text, Patisandhi chitta, except Abhidhamma. Gabbasa, avakanti gabbanta, okanti, terms like this, Buddha, jati, and so on, Buddha used these words in sutras. In Abhidhamma, they added this word called patisandhi chitta. Patisandhi means joining. Patisandhi means joining again. It was disconnected and then connected. And other consciousness, in other places, the word in the rest of this, vijnana is used, eye consciousness, chakku vijnana and so on, vijnana is used.
Is the life continuum or bhavanga mentioned in suttas?
Yeah, life continuum consciousness also is not found in the suttas.
No.
That also is from Abhidhamma. You can read this very quickly. Anytime we see objects, hear sounds, smell, taste, touch, or touch a tangible, or think of the thought, feeling, perception, volition, formations, contact, and attention arise. Underlying factor of all of them, is consciousness. For instance, when you hear a sound, you cannot hear the sound without consciousness. You have to be conscious to hear the sound. Similarly, smell. No matter how much smell is around, if we are not conscious, we don't smell anything. Taste and touch and so forth. The therefore function of consciousness is to know objects and generate mentality and materiality. This is very important. As soon as consciousness arises, when you are conscious of something, that is the moment consciousness arises. When you are conscious of something at that moment, your mentality and materiality arise. Meaning, suppose you smell something. As soon as you smell something, your feeling of the smell, perception of the smell, contact of the smell, thought of the smell, attention of the smells arise. Right? Mm-hmm. That very moment, all these five are called mentality. At the same time, you are aware of the smell in a very subtle way, its hardness, softness, moisture, and air. These four are called materiality. Pathavi, Apo, Tejo, Vayu. And these four and these five arise at the same time that consciousness arises. So, they are there. If there is no consciousness, none of them you know. So the consciousness has such a power to not only for you to become aware of it, but also to arouse what is there that you are not aware before. Therefore, depending upon consciousness, mentality and materiality arise, eliminates the wrong view that mental and materiality are one thing. When consciousness arises, then you become aware of what arises along with consciousness. Then you know the mentality and materiality is not one single thing, and consciousness is not something that arises by itself. Consciousness also needs something to arise. So nothing can arise independently. All arise dependently. That is why this discourse is called dependent origination. We are learning how all arise depending on something.
But they are a conception. Is the consciousness comes into the womb first then? Or I know.
What?
at conception.
Oh yeah?
So what comes first, mentality, materiality, or consciousness?
I think according to Mahanidana Sutra and Anguttara Nikaya, these three things must arise materiality can be maybe 1 second, one thought moment earlier before mentality rises. But these three things must present when we will come to that. We have a section there.
Okay.
We will discuss that. So then consciousness is treated separately. This is where we have to. We will discuss this again. I just mentioned briefly. Consciousness is treated separately from mentality. As we have seen, there is a group called mentality and materiality. Mentality is made up of contact, feeling, perception, thought, and attention. These five don't operate without consciousness. So consciousness is not mentioned in either group, and yet they cannot operate without consciousness. Is it clear now? Although consciousness is not mentioned in mentality group and materiality group, they cannot operate without consciousness. I gave examples here. Consciousness arises along with contact. Consciousness arises along with feelings. Consciousness arises along with perception. Consciousness arises along with volitional formations. Consciousness arises along with attention. Now, volitional formations is the will or wish or desire. Consciousness arises along with the desire. What is this desire? This desire is desire to exist. When contact arises, without our awareness, desire is there in that contact. So that is volitional formations. Then attention arises along with consciousness, attention arises along with feelings, and so forth. You can see all these are interconnected. I don't have to read the whole thing. It is very easy to read.
Bhante?
Yeah?
In this list, why perception not there? After consciousness, it says attention arises with
Perception,
contact.
I think I forgot it.
I think it is there on the second one. Contact arises along with perception and consciousness.
Yeah. If it is not there, it is, I think one place I have mentioned, consciousness arising along with perception. And I have forgotten to mention perception arises along with consciousness. I forgot to mention. I think when we read this, whatever is missing, you can easily add because it is very...
I was grouping them, that's what I did.
I think it is very good to make that group. Yeah.
Bhante?
Yeah.
You mentioned that volitional formations.
What?
You were discussing like volitional formations and that every moment carries a desire to exist. What about in someone who's suicidal?
Some of that?
What about someone who's suicidal?
Someone suicidal?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That also is volitional. volition, will is there to, especially when a person is very confused, this will arises in him or her because of the confusion. Will to end life. Now, willing to end life can not arise in a mind which is very clear and developed. Yes, there is that will or volition formations. Yeah. But underneath what that person has is, I want to live better life. Nobody actually wants to die. If there is, if the person can see some hope. So the person does not see hope because of confused state of mind. What the person has to do is to find a way to develop hope, to arouse hope. In the Buddha's teaching, we always have what is called very special term we use, spiritual urgency. When we develop spiritually, we think the value of life. The value of life. You know, even one who attains full enlightenment has done everything. He does not need anything. He has given up all desires and so on, but still he lives for the benefit of others. Still he lives for the benefit of others. So he doesn't have the kind of will that we have, ordinary person have, but they have a will to share the liberation, experience of liberation for the benefit of others. Okay. Now let us see. Mental, verbal and physical activities arise along with perception and consciousness. Mental, verbal and physical activities arise along with attention and consciousness. If you become unconscious or are made unconscious, then you don't feel anything. Anybody can do anything to your body. Body can function for a while without consciousness. This means when consciousness arises, contact, feeling, perception and thoughts and attention also arise along with consciousness. They reinforce each other. Consciousness reinforce mentality, and mentality reinforces consciousness. And mentality and materiality both. We will discuss this later in this class. Consciousness is the seed of becoming. If it grows and multiplies in the field of volitional formations of kamma. Then it gets its nourishment from craving. That is why the Buddha said, kammam kettam viññānam bījam tanha sineho. Now, here is a question. A monk asked the Buddha, Venerable Ananda, becoming is said, in what way, Venerable Sir, is it called becoming? If, Ananda, there is no kamma that ripens in the element of sensual plane, is there sensual plane element? Now the sensual plane element called kama dhatu, Buddha's question is, if there is no kamma that ripens in the level of sensual planes, there is no sensual plane element. So what is the element of sensual plane, therefore? Is kamma. Kamma is the element of sensual plane. Kamma. Since the kamma is the element of sensual plane, it is called kama dhatu. Kama means desire. Desire to see, hear, smell, touch and so forth. All these desires together is called kama dhatu, elements of sensual plane. Okay. Then Buddha explained these planes of existence. And thus, kamma is the field, consciousness is the seed, and the craving is the moisture. Consciousness of living beings that are obstructed by ignorance and bound by craving enters and ripens in lower elements, thus becoming righteous. So how we explain becoming? When the desire for sensual plane, this plane, when we have to imagine, this plane is not like earth or some particular place. It is a level of mind. In the mind there is a level where sense desire operates. So long as that sense desire operates, sensual element is there. That element is the plane, sensual element. And that element is called kama dhatu, and at that moment the person is in that sensual plane. At that moment the person is in that sensual plane. We see the same thing in other planes as well. So what is said here is that living beings are obstructed by ignorance and bound by craving. Consciousness seed is planted in karma field, then craving nourishes it. Then their existence takes place in lower plane. Ignorance obstructs our wisdom to make better choice. So if we are wise, we will not choose sensual plane. The human life, animal life and divine life are the lower realms of existence, compared to the fine material existence and immaterial existence. Since living beings are sensual pleasure oriented, their consciousness is strengthened by contact with sensual pleasures that arise through eyes, ears, and so on. Their feeling for sensual pleasure is strengthened by form, sound, and so forth. They prepare themselves for existence in the sensual plane. That's simple. We train our senses through desire and ignorance to exist in that plane. Therefore, we are there. That's simple. In this life or any other existence. So the Buddha said, Dasananda, karma is fuel, consciousness is the seed, craving is the moisture. Consciousness of living beings that are obstructed by ignorance and bound by craving enters and ripens in medium level, thus becoming rises. So, medium level becoming rises. Now, 3 levels. Kama dhatu, using the word dhatu, kama dhatu, rupa dhatu, this is the rupa dhatu. Rupa dhatu means when one practices meditation, especially concentration meditation, and gain jhanas, and attain the 4th jhana, that state, at that mind, the person may be like all of us in the kama dhatu, sensual plane we live. While living in sensual plane, we develop the mind of fine material existence. At that time, we are in that fine material existence. When we are at that jhanic level, although the body is here in human world, but our mind is in rupa dhatu. That is fine material element, that state. Now physically we may not be there, but the mental state is at that level. Now we see the way the Buddha shows us to eliminate one state of mind for the sake of another state of mind. Now we go to the third, that is to medium level becoming. At that time we have become fine material beings. First we were in sensual plane beings. Now we go to fine material level, fine material dhatu, that is medium level. So medium element means the material existence, fine material existence, also plane where beings come into existence due to their karma, craving and ignorance. They prepare their human life to take their existence in fine material form through the practice of fine material jhana. That is not the end of this samsara. There is a mistake here. Now, if we keep practicing meditation and going into the jhana and enjoy jhana and stay there all our life, that is where we will end up. But the desire is still there. So temporarily we will be in rupa dhatu. Then Buddha said, Dasananda, karma is field, consciousness is the seed, craving is moisture, consciousness of living beings that are obstructed by ignorance and bound by craving is elements, thus becoming rice. Now the third one, superior, panita, kama dhatu, rupa dhatu and panita dhatu. refers to immaterial attainment. It is also an element. Immaterial element is superior to all other elements. Nevertheless, even it is made possible due to craving, ignorance and karma. Someone practices immaterial jhanas with the hope of entering in immaterial realms. This is his attachment to immaterial existence. During his meditation, he not only prepares for the existence in immaterial realm, but also he is in immaterial realm. At that moment, he is. Many people experience this. That is not something difficult in meditation. To be in immaterial form. Immaterial form means they are called arupa attainment. Kama, rupa, arupa. So we mentioned if he dies while practicing immaterial jhana, he will be reborn in immaterial realm. He is not free from greed, ignorance and karma. Still they are there. While practicing his immaterial jhana, he is preparing himself to exist in the... Okay. What we perceive something and then we think about what we have perceived, then thought arises. This thought can be with desire or without desire, depending on the degree of mindfulness. We perceive certain things through eyes, ears and so on. This perception can be pure perception or perception with desire. The very good sutta, for we don't have time to discuss this, I like to mention the Mula Pariyaya Sutta, the first discourse in Majjhima Nikaya, which we have not discussed, and also in a practical way, this was put into practice in the discourse that Buddha gave to Bahya. You perceive ditte dittamatam, sute sutamatam, vinyate vinyatamatam, and so on. You perceive with eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind, and just make sure that your perception limits to only that particular perception. Nothing more, no less. So this is how they put into practice. So Buddha not only mentioned in discourses, but he brought out examples like Bahya and various other enlightened persons.
Bhante, I have a question. The non-material or fine material existence, beings in those realms, do they have senses?
They may have, they are not gone beyond senses, but they all are fine material and or immaterial. We cannot say that they are totally free from senses.
Like they don't have sense organs.
Sense organ like us.
Right. We're not sure, or we're not. I'm not sure. Is it clearly explained or not?
It is not very explained anywhere whether they have senses or not. But those who practice those states are reported to have been born in Brahma realms.
Right.
In that realms, they were able to perceive things happening elsewhere. If someone of any form can perceive something, that person, that being, must have a perceptible, the object, the source.
Right.
Source is a sense. Sense which is used for perceiving
other realms.
Other things.
Yeah.
And therefore, logically we can think that there must be a sense which may not be the same gross form that we have.
Right.
Even our perception is not that gross. Perception is very subtle thing. Subtle and personal. Variable. Depending on various things. And therefore, that is why it is called mentality. Or nama. Nama means we can talk about by using names. That's all. For instance, feeling is very common, obvious experience. Can we show feelings? No way. All mental states are immaterial. But this imperceptible, immaterial state we use for our communication. We express our feelings in a certain way, but certain feelings we cannot express. Certain feelings we cannot express. And yet you cannot say that they don't exist. Similarly, I think those beings who are in such a state may have senses which are so fine that we human beings, with our ordinary human senses, cannot explain their nature of existence. It's impossible. Because even here as human beings, although we experience so many things, we cannot explain all this. That is why I always respect the Buddha. Buddha, even though these experiences we all have are wonderful, very, very most subtle experiences, Buddha was able to explain it. That is how I'm really wonder how he used words to explain these things. The mind must be so fully
luminous.
Totally
luminous.
We have this in this, you look at it. When you come to luminous, so here is another thing. Consciousness returns to mentality and materiality. This we have mentioned in earlier class, one of the classes. Vipassi Bodhisattva, Vipassi Buddha, he went in reverse order, dependent origination, reverse order, and got stuck with mentality and materiality. When we think of it, we know what is mentality, what is materiality now. At least roughly we know. Mentality are those 5, materiality are those 4. Right?
Mm-hmm.
If you think of anybody, any place, anything in your entire experience in your life, what do you think? You think of the form, or the outside form, so your form. You think of your feelings. This is how I felt. You think of your perception. This is how I perceived in the past. And if you had any thought, you think this is what I thought. If you have any attention, this is how I paid attention. If you have any contact, you think this is how I contacted. And then that is mentality side. Materiality side, you feel whether it is hard, soft, moist, cold, warm. What else? The mind cannot go beyond that. So, mind has to return to consciousness. Vijnana is consciousness. The consciousness cannot go beyond. That is why we said mentality group is here, materiality group is here, consciousness is here. These 3, this triangle, these 3 always work together. Now, consciousness cannot go beyond materiality, nor can go beyond mentality. So it keeps circulating around these 3. So the consciousness turned back. It does not go further than mind and form. It is this extent that one may be born and age and die, pass away and reborn. That is when there is consciousness with name and form and as its condition, and name and form with consciousness as its conditions, with the name and form as condition, the 6 senses and so forth. Now, consciousness turns back. It does not go further than name and form. Here name and form is mentality and material. Name and form is little confusing, not clear. If it's mentality and materiality, then we find some substance in it, more than just the name and form. And therefore, mentality and materiality may be better for us to use. Because what happened in the mentality group, we can know only by name. There is no other way to know. That is why it is called name group. In the form category, we can talk about the form, but even the form is very much like name. Hardness is the characteristic of earth element, but hardness, when we talk about hardness, it is a mental image of hardness. We cannot touch everything in the world, but when we talk about materiality group, one is earth element. When we talk earth element, what comes to our mind is hardness. Hardness. And softness also. Because something at one time hard, that can become another time soft. There are certain things like some grains, they are hard. When we boil, it becomes soft. Eggs, when it is fresh, it is soft. When it is boiled, it is hard.
Hard boiled.
So, this is not a fixed designation. Hardness and softness is, for instance, ice. First you say ice, very hard. Take ice block and hit somebody to hurt. And if after some times, when the temperature rises, it becomes soft, melt. And then it becomes water element. Then after some times it vaporize. It goes with air. And then when the temperature rises, it becomes hot. So in the same ice cube, you can find all the four elements. And therefore nothing is permanent, has permanent designation, permanent entity in it. So, and therefore hardness, softness, oscillation and radiation, we can understand by names. Therefore, in that respect, form also is a kind of name. Name also is a kind of name. So, so it is the understanding that makes the difference.
Like something you're trying to say, like everything is a concept only. It's a concept of a mind.
Concept of the mind.
Oh, abstraction.
Yeah?
Abstraction is another word.
Right. So the Buddha said, it is to this extent that one may be born, age and die, pass away and reborn. That is, when there is consciousness with name and form, as it conditioned. Now, consciousness is the name and form are the conditions for consciousness. When there is consciousness with name and form as its conditions, and name and form with consciousness as it, name and form is, consciousness is the condition for name and form. Name and form is the condition for consciousness. So there is no escape, they all must go together. So with name and form as condition, the six sense bases. The sentence is not complete, six sense bases arise. Now, we will discuss this later on. I don't want to start it right now because there is in the dependent orientation there is a section on Namarupa, Vijnana Paccaya Namarupa, the third step, third item. I have not started it yet. We are still on consciousness, vijnana. Now, consciousness in immaterial existence. Immaterial existence is the highest existence in samsara. Even there, mind holds on to mentality and materiality. And therefore, even in that state, there is mentality, materiality in a most fine form, extremely fine. It is so insignificant that it's almost non-existent. It may be like a shadow of a material existence. Even in that state, mentality is comprised of contact, feeling, perception, thoughts, and attention. They too are extremely subtle, but even in that state of mentality, materiality, consciousness exists. So even in that state, mentality is supported by consciousness, and consciousness is supported by mentality. So one is the condition for the other, and one depends on the other. They all depend on each other. So this means consciousness always holds on to materiality and mentality, and no matter where it travels in its own imaginary universe, it must return to its own base for its existence. So this is what when Vipassana Bodhisattva said, and our Buddha also mentioned it repeatedly. Then, how does consciousness arise dependent upon volitional formations? Now we have not come to that level, but that discussion, wherever we make intentional movement of body, consciousness arises. Now even in dream, or even in sleep, we move. Apparently there is no conscious movement, but there is consciousness to make that movement in sleep. We are talking, as I mentioned several times here, we are talking only about living beings, not about inanimate objects. Okay? Wherever we make any intentional verbal sound, consciousness arises. We may make, suppose we are groaning in pain, suppose we are in what you call hospice situation, even sedated, given morphine, and still the feeling may be subsided, but the consciousness is still there. Anytime any thought arises in the mind, consciousness arises. This means consciousness does not arise by itself without physical, verbal, or mental activities. I think this may be clear already. Thought that arisen in the mind are verbal conditions, and perceptions and feeling are mind conditions. We have discussed this earlier as well. Now, here is what Buddha mentioned in Mahanidana Sutta. Thus, Ananda, dependent on mentality, materiality, consciousness arises, and dependent on consciousness, mentality, materiality arises. So these are two interdependent. Okay, this simile, I think we briefly mentioned earlier. Simile of the chitta. Some of you may not be here, may have not been here, but this simile is very important to remember. A simile of chitta. When we think about it, we are really shocked to know the power of this, our mind, human mind. The Buddha used the word chitta, the picture, it's called charana chitta. The word charana means moving. Moving, charana. The movement is charana. Charana is a very good term for modern movies. But Buddha used the word, this simile, to illustrate more than modern movie. It is very simple simile. Buddha asked bhikkhus, I do not see any other order of living beings so diversified as those in the animal realm. Even those beings in the animal realms have been diversified by the mind. Yet the mind is even more diverse than those beings in animal realms. Now, animal realms, beings to be born in animal realms, in previous lives their minds must have been so diversified. When we think of animal beings now, so many varieties of them in the sky, flying animals, walking animals, swimming animals, crawling animals. When we take of them, we cannot even classify them to reasonable categories, because so many are there of various shapes, size, color. You take, birds, their color, there are so many different things. And they are in that state, in those states, because of the mind that was prepared to be in that state. And now, if Buddha were to live today, he would be shocked to see what the science, modern science, technology has done. You have seen, very tiny example. You have seen this Life 360. You know that? Life 360 device is an app. It is in your computer, in your cell phone.
Yes.
It has a GPS. When I walk, you can see me walking. If I fall down, you can see me falling. If I drive, you can see me driving.
The speed.
And the speed. You can tell me, oh, you are driving too fast. Slow down. You are in such and such an intersection. GPS. Exactly GPS. It is called Life 360. See how much mind can do. So in this little thing, every sound that comes through this mouth is there. When we think of all kind of things that are there in the world today, are all created by mind. All by mind. Whatever science, technology, I don't have vocabulary to mention the names of the things that are invented. Still we are inventing. And we don't know where we go, how far we can go. But all these are created by the mind. We even can create a God. If we want, we can create a God. Right. According to our whims and wish. Right? We can create one. Even the God is created by our human mind. If there is anyone called God, we can create. We can create so many things, and therefore Buddha said, the mind is so powerful that Buddha finally said, because I cannot give even a simile to illustrate the power of mind. Then the last section, I think this is simile of Lord of the city. I think you like this very much, because we have not discussed this earlier. Suppose because a king had the frontier city with strong ramparts, walls and arcs, and with 6 gates. The gatekeeper posted there would be wise, competent, and intelligent, one who keeps out strangers and admits acquaintances. A swift pair of messengers would come from the east and ask the gatekeeper, where, good man, is the lord of the city? He would reply, he is sitting in the center square. Then the swift pair of messengers would deliver a message of reality to the lord of the city and leave by the route by which they had arrived. Similarly, messengers would come from the west, from the north, from the south, deliver the message and leave the same way. And Buddha said, I have made up this simile because in order to convey a meaning, that is, this is the meaning here. The city, this is the designation for this body consisting of the 4 great elements, originates from mother and father, built up out of boiled rice. They didn't have bread, I think, those days. Gruel, subject to impermanence, to being worn and rubbed away, to breaking apart, dispersal. The 6 gates, this is the designation for 6 internal sense bases. The gatekeeper, this is the designation for mindfulness. The swift pair of messengers, this is the designation for serenity and insight. The lord of the city, this is the designation for consciousness. The center square, this is the designation for the 4 great elements, the earth and so on. The messenger of reality, this is the designation of Nibbana. The route by which they had arrived, and this is the destination for Noble Eightfold Path. That is right view and so on. This is a very beautiful simile. Who is the Lord of the city?
Consciousness.
Huh?
Consciousness. Consciousness.
Consciousness. Consciousness. So it is the consciousness that receives all this. Mindfulness, insight, samatha, vipassana, all this come to the consciousness. Therefore, it is the consciousness that makes next life possible with all this package. Consciousness has the package. With that package, consciousness make an impact on another mentality, materiality to exist another life. It is the impact of this consciousness that makes next life possible, not the same consciousness jumping from here to there. Okay. Now, there is another consciousness called Visankaragatan Chittam. We read it in Dhammapada. As soon as Buddha attained enlightenment, he recited the Yadahave Padavahan Dhamma, that those stanzas, 3 stanzas we recited at the very beginning of these classes. Remember? On the dependent origination classes.
Yes.
We started with these 3 stanzas. That is Yadahave Padavahan Dhamma. This particular stanza we find in the Dhammapada, where Buddha said, Aneka jati sansarang, sandha visang anibhisang, gahakarakang gavesanto, dukkha jati punapunang, gahakaraka dittosi, punagehan nakahasi, sabbate phasuka bhagga, gahakutang visankitang, visankhara gatan chittang, tannanang kayamajjaga. Through many a birth I wandered in samsara, seeking but not finding the builder of this house. O house builder, thou art seen, thou shalt not build house again, thou ridgepole is shattered, thy backbone is broken. The mind has become free from sankhara, visankhara gata. The mind has become free from sankhara. That is called the consciousness free from all conditions. Unconditioned state of mind. All other states of consciousness of everyone is conditioned. They don't arise without mentality and materiality. When the conditions of mentality, materiality arise are due to what? Greed and ignorance. Greed and ignorance. When the greed and ignorance are totally eliminated, the mind exists free from all conditions. Therefore, does the mind exist?
That's
Mind exists.
Mind.
without it.
Eh?
Yeah, that's the question. Does the mind exist?
Yeah. Now, we have another section here. I don't know whether you mentioned here. I think in previous classes, one of the previous classes I mentioned, Pabhasaramidam bhikkhve chittam. The mind is luminous. There are 2 passages. One passage says mind is limited. It is defiled by the adventitious defilements. Therefore, ordinary unlearned putujjana does not practice samatha meditation because he does not know how to remove the adventitious defilements. Without those adventitious defilements, mind is luminous. Then the next passage, Buddha says, mind is luminous, there is no adventitious defilements. Pabhasyaramedambhikve chittang thanchako aganturake upaklesahi vipamuttam. Thanchako agantuke upaklesi vipamuttam. Mind is luminous, that mind is not polluted by adventitious defilements. Therefore, learned disciple can practice or does practice vipassana meditation. So Buddha had both samatha meditation and vipassana meditation. And therefore, he was able to liberate the mind from hindrances and fetters and so on. And he also was able to penetrate through the barriers of all permanency, satisfactoriness and self. And when the mind is free from all this, that mind is visankhara, without condition. That is unconditional mind, is the mind that one has, that the consciousness that is the Nibbanic consciousness. Nibbanic consciousness. In that state, consciousness, object of consciousness is Nibbana, which itself is without any conditions. So Nibbana consciousness is there at that time.
So now I think we had conversation also, like so in this Nibbana, so what kind of sankhara, what kind of, that there is no, so this is this act, still he's act, there is no activity, or there is
Very good question. They have all activities that we have, all movement that we have. They eat, they drink, they move, they talk, give Dhamma talk, and 45 years Buddha gave Dhamma talks and so forth. All they did without this much craving, this much disappointment, completely free from all defilements.
But I'm sorry, Bhante, but they still have to make choices.
Huh?
But the arahant still has to make a choice. Do they make choices?
Make a choice.
Yeah, how they choose to go brush their teeth, or how they choose to eat. How does this work?
When something is totally irrelevant to the luminous mental state, they would not react, they would not do anything in that situation. Suppose somebody asks a question, like there are 10 questions Buddha did not answer. Why he did not answer those questions? Because two things. One is they all come from various viewpoints, various points of views are behind these questions. Opinions, ideas, logics, arguments, discussions are behind these questions. And getting involved in them, if they approved one of them, he also falls into one of those categories. They are totally waste of time, because we will never come to an end. For instance, one question is the world eternal or not eternal? what this question got to do with our liberation? If even the world is eternal, or not eternal, what that got to do with our suffering? Getting rid of our suffering? Nothing. Secondly, he did not answer these questions. These questions will not lead to Nibbana. And therefore, they make the choice. They make the choice. If the question or the situation or whatever is not related to that goal, they would not react. When you ask a question, they would know how far this question can go. If it is simple, mundane, ordinary questions, for instance, can I live without food? If you ask the Buddha, how can I live without food? Buddha said, you cannot live without food, because that's a simple question. If you ask, can I live without oxygen? Buddha would say, well, you cannot live without oxygen. These are simple answers. Even though they don't have any direct relationship to Nibbana, but for the ordinary mundane existence, ordinary level, we need that. Buddha ate food for that reason, just to survive. So they made choices without greed, hatred and delusion. They made choices which always related to this unconditional state.
It could also be like unconditional metta, like full metta, right?
Yeah, even metta is subject to change, impermanent.
Right.
But he would, for human harmony of all living beings, he would like to promote metta.
Right.
It doesn't mean that metta is the final answer to everything.
Okay, can you explain like what the simile of Lord of the City represent? I didn't get clarity. I understood the simile, that conscious, like how it is configured. Simile of Lord of the City. What does it relate to? What does it correspond to?
Simile of Lord of the City?
Yes.
It corresponds, is explained here. Lord of the City is consciousness. All the messengers come through our six senses, and the gatekeeper is the mindfulness, and these messengers coming through the six senses deliver two messages, samatha and vipassana. These are the two messages. It's a very beautiful simile. When you hear a sound, for instance, when you hear sound, you can use the sound either to develop your concentration or to develop your mindfulness. People listening to very beautiful, soft, gentle songs to gain concentration. During that concentration, no hindrances are there. The person may begin with the desire for the sound. But as the sound settles down in the mind, there is no desire for the sound. But including other hindrances, all hindrances vanish, mind becomes very sharp and clean and clear, and then begin to see impermanence of the sound. You cannot see impermanence of the sound so long as you have a desire. Anybody who has desire hate to hear the words impermanence. I mean, in a gross level, anybody who has desire for sensual pleasure hates to hear the word impermanence. But that hate comes for hearing the impermanence is due to ignorance of impermanence. When that mind is sharp, clear, pure, then, since there is no hindrances, the mind can see impermanence. Ignorance is disappeared. Ignorance disappeared. And then start building mindfulness. This is how these two join together. Always these two join together, mindfulness and concentration. So, through any sound, any message we get through our eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and mind, we get these two messages. We get these two ways of practicing mindfulness and insight, what you call samatha and vipassana, concentration and mindfulness.
So that's what you start the beginning of that thing in Anapanasati Sutta, that Buddha, I do not, so there is a development of mindfulness of breathing for one who is forgetful.
Forgetful, yeah.
So every time we have to, like if one forgets about other side, then it's not mindfulness. Like
right.
if just increase on shamatha side, how would you?
Vipassana side. Even as I mentioned, so many trillions things are happening in our mind. The moment we try to verbalize, we lose our mindfulness. We lose our concentration. And therefore, from the very beginning of meditation, we must learn to pay attention to what is there. I have mentioned this, repeated this in many ways in my mindfulness in plain English. Just pay attention to what is there. What is there is not existing. What is there is a movement, activity. If you try to think of a word to verbalize it, you lose the boat. You miss the boat.
And I think that's what happens. Like we get lost into any scene or anything. We just tend to.
Yeah.
So this is a practice, basically. Slowly we have to be.
Right. And therefore this simile is a very, very good simile to remember. The simile of Lord of the City.
Can we say it is our own body? The simile is about us?
About
person.
Who else?
Yeah, person.
Who else? This simile is us.
Both mentality, materiality, both, because
This is the whole world. Whole world, whole person, whole being, the meditator, Bhante ji, Prashant, that's all. And in that you find everything. Everything that Buddha said. I think we must finish.
Yeah, I have one more question. Sorry. When Venerable Ananda asked about becoming, so Buddha explained the lower realm, human realm, sensual realms, and the material, fine material, immaterial. All those are subject to be born again. So did Buddha meant to say the enlightenment is also becoming?
No.
No.
Enlightenment, very good question. Bhava, becoming is bhava.
Yeah.
Now, enlightenment is the attainment. enlightenment is the ending of all this.
Yeah.
Now, enlightenment and becoming of bhava and vibhava are totally different things. Enlightenment is vibhava, not becoming. Living is becoming this and that is a bhava. So enlightenment is not becoming. Enlightenment is not becoming.
Right. So becoming means power, and you end up in any of those realms.
Enlightenment means ending of becoming.
Or any of those, not born on any of those realms.
Yeah. I think I must end it.